Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. The subject of today's video is going to be the old game In the Labyrinth, the fantasy trip, how it functioned, and how simplistic the game was, and then how I took that and rules from D20 Modern and made a modern day zombie game. If you all don't mind, please hit the like button. And if you had any games that you had converted or modified to make a game system that would fit a story you were trying to tell, please comment it below. Now, In the Labyrinth, the fantasy trip, there is 3 stats for the game. You have your strength, which was how strong you were, what you could carry, your saves were poison and disease, and what type of weapons you could wield based on your strength, and your mana if you were a spellcaster. There was the dexterity score, which was your reflexes and all your attack rolls. Then there is the IQ score, which was your ability to, like all your mental stats for D&D, your ability to see things, hear things, learn stuff, recall stuff, make mental saves versus charm, compulsion, and stuff like that. There was two types of there's 2 types of heroes. There is the hero type, which was further broken down into like merchants, thieves, rogues, woodsmans, fighters. Fighters had its own like 6-section breakdown of barbarian, tank, knight, and stuff like that. And then the other type was wizards. Wizards were just the spellcasters of the game. They are not as common as they are in modern fantasy games like D&D 4th and 5th edition and Pathfinder. Essentially 1 in 100 people in that setting could use magic. Out of player characters, you would just roll a 6-sided dice and you had a 30% chance to be a wizard. IQ was used to learn talents, which were like skills and proficiencies from D&D, and feats. So you compile all that together as one thing. You would look under the table based on how high your IQ was, and you could learn anything from that table or lower. And then you would subtract that from your total IQ points, because that was your pool to use to learn the skills and the feats. The way you did your rolls, well, the way you set up your stats in that game is most races that you would roll randomly to start with, since you didn't usually pick, at least the way we played, you always just rolled on the random table presented. You would the races would break down to 8 in strength, 8 in dex, 8 in IQ, and then you have 8 points to distribute. Some races would be modified higher or lower on their starting stats, and then give you less points to distribute, which would pretty much equal out to exactly the 8s that I just listed. You want to have higher stats in what you really want to be good at. Usually I focus on combat starting, so I want dex higher and sometimes higher strength for those hit points. I always want dex higher, because if it's higher than 10 to 12, I have more of a chance of hitting, because the way rolls work in the Labyrinth, the D6 system, is you roll 3 6-sided dice for your normal attack rolls, saves, and everything else, and you need to get under the score that you're trying to utilize. So if you're trying to force a door open, that's your strength, you need to roll 3 dice under it. If you're trying to hit something, you need to roll 3 dice under your dex. Criticals were a 5 or lower on that. 5 and a 4 was a 2 times critical, and then a 3 was a 3 times critical. Automatic failure is above your stat or a 17, and then an 18 is a critical failure. Armor in the Labyrinth, the fantasy trip, functions different than how it would be for most other games, and my reference is mostly D&D on that. Armor in D&D makes you harder to hit. Armor in the Labyrinth, the fantasy trip, gives you damage reduction. Like from 3rd edition, barbarians and stuff had damage reduction as they got more powerful, or in Pathfinder, barbarians get damage reduction as they get more powerful. Well, so everyone's proficient in armor. You don't spend anything to be proficient in armor, so your best bet's to pick up armor as soon as you can, and that would reduce the damage you have coming in at you. And that's, for the most part, how an In the Labyrinth character works. Now, to level up, you need, I believe it was 125 experience at level 1 to gain another point. And after you gain 3 points, that experience table doubles, and then you need 3 points at that new experience marker, and then it doubles again. And then you would just slowly be increasing your character that way. Experience broken down by monsters was, you get experience equal to the hit points of the monster, and then if you killed it, you would get extra experience points for being the person that killed it from either their IQ or their dex, whichever was higher. So you get a reward for pushing the attack by being the one that kills whatever it was you were attacking. And that is the best breakdown I can do about In the Labyrinth. Now, what I set out to do, this was about 10 years ago in college, and this wasn't to be produced for copyright reasons and stuff, but this was for us to use to have fun. We looked up D20 Modern, and we looked up weapon damages. So you take that, say a 9mm does 2d6 damage. Okay, 9mm does 2d6 damage. You take that, you use that as the weapon, part of the weapons. Just take that whole list of weapons from D20 Modern and use that in the game. We pretty much started everyone out 8s and all their stats and 8 points to use how they want. We pulled the D20 Modern feats for combat and proficiencies for weapons to be used in the game. After doing all that, we then had to grab the armors and figure out what values we would give them, since armor works differently than how D20 Modern had it working. And the simplest way we did that was just say, if it's an armor that gives you a +2 in D20 Modern, then it's an armor that gives you a damage reduction too. After that, we then had to go in and create stats for the monsters, which isn't too hard, but you got to figure out what you want. We started pulling creatures from Resident Evil and then figuring out how we'd want to stat them based on the monsters that exist in the fantasy trip. We took a zombie, and it would, if it was a weak zombie, it'd have under 10 hit points and a dex of 8, so it'd have a hard time hitting the players normally. And then we boosted that up to a regular zombie and then a tough zombie, giving them more hit points as it went. Fast zombie had a higher dex. We even did Crimson Heads, which would have been fast zombies, but they would have been more like fast skeletons. And we modified them. They got more attacks in a turn than normal, so they could attack twice. And that's how we set that up. Then all you had to do after that is create your story, and then that would be no different than creating any other adventure for D&D or Call of Cthulhu. You just have the setting of modern day for that one that I was creating. And then play up the horror of the gore and everything else as the game progresses, because why not? Well, that's how I took In the Labyrinth and turned it into a modern day zombie game. If you all know of any game systems that were or used to be in production or is currently used that are as simple as In the Labyrinth that could be converted into stuff, put them in the comments below. I'm curious to see what all is out there. Well, hope to see you guys again next video.